Hey, welcome back to another episode of Bucky's Pagan Guided Adventures. This week we're going to go over elemental cores of Spellcraft. Spellcraft is used in many sects of society, like from Christianity, Islam, Wiccanism, or just even your solitary pagan practitioner, even just a dude on the street. But I'm going to go over this in finite detail for the next while. I'm going to warn you, there's a lot of friggin' information in this one, so if I go a little bit overboard, I apologize in advance. So sit back and enjoy the ride with me here. As I've kind of traveled through this wonderful world of paganism, I kind of noticed that all spell work is all put into one group. And it doesn't really matter if you're a Christian, a Wiccan, or just a dude on the street. We all use the same methods of spellcraft, and I will get into that later on in the podcast. But let's start with those four elements. Those four elements are fire, water, earth, and wind. I'm going to work through all four of those elements, real-world examples on each. The tarot meaning behind them, the rune application behind them, and how we can actually utilize them in our life. At the end of this podcast, I will give you a bonus feature where we talk about the elemental application within your own personal life and some of the pitfalls that we can actually fall into. But before we start off with all the good things, I think there is some things that we need to discuss just as a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll carry on with our merry adventure. Spell work is the imposition of your own assertions into the destinies of others. So there's a lot of different cultural rules behind this. One would be the Christian golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Don't try to utilize this energy or power to have somebody do what you want them to do. If you want to help somebody, talk to them or even work with them through this, but don't use it as an imposition. And that's also echoed with the Wiccan rule that if you utilize any spellcraft to do anything, whatever you do will be revisited upon you 3 times. So if you sow blessings, then you get blessings back. If you sow cursings, you get cursings back. That being said, I know some people who do hexes, and they don't have any negative that comes back on them. That one I'll probably tackle in a completely different podcast because that's a different ball of wax altogether. But one thing I want to kind of draw your attention to in regards to what's happening right now is that with this, we're seeing a lot of this assertion of energy coming back to us. There's an organization in the States of witches that are cursing Donald Trump. It's obviously working because if we take a look at what happened since Trump got into office, there's a lot of things outside of Donald Trump's control that are happening. A pandemic, North Korea. There's a lot of things that are kind of happening, but it's kind of like shooting yourself in the foot and really shooting the friggin' rest of the world in the foot too. Giving all these curses to the leader of the strongest nation in the world in which you reside in is kind of not really a bright idea. That's like standing on a branch and sawing off the at the stump. You're going to fall, and it's not going to be good. So practice safe spellcraft. I'm going to give you a little bit of a parable, and that parable is the parable of the Arabic monkey paw. People say it's the Voodoo Monkey Paw, and it's actually from a short story by W.W. Jacobs. With the monkey paw, there's a young man who gets into possession of the Voodoo Monkey Paw, and with it, he has the 5 fingers up, and he makes a wish. Well, the first wish that he makes is, I wish I had $1 million. And then magically and mystically, the finger curls down, giving 4 fingers left. And his uncle dies, and he inherits $1 million. So then he is so distraught, he lost his uncle. He wishes that he could have his uncle back. And so then his uncle comes back from the grave as a zombie, and it starts to get worse from there. In the very end of the whole entire story, he has 1 thumb left, and he wishes that he never made a wish in the first place. The thumb goes down, he's destroyed, and everything is restored back to its normal self. And that's a very good parable for spellcraft. Don't let your desires and selfish wants go into your spellcraft. Make sure your spellcraft is more of an outward intentional expression of what you want to share, how you want to benefit the world around you, and not how you want to curse somebody around you. And then you will see that there is some great rewards that can actually come from it. That's our housekeeping. So we're going to hop right into the elements. Now I'm going to encourage you to do some audience participation here and take a pen and draw out a compass rose, north, south, east, and west. On the north, I want you to put fire. On the east, I want you to put air. On the south, water. And on the west, earth. And we're going to work through it. The reason why I bring that up is because some people, when they practice magic, will align themselves to the compass row for the specific type of energy. Now, that's, of course, when you're deep inside of it. If you're just following behind for societal understanding, it's kind of information that's good to know, but not necessary, of course. So when we look at the north and we are dealing with the fire element, we need to realize the fire element is all around passions, destruction, balance, and purification. In the tarot deck, the tarot that manages that is the magician. The rune is Kanaz, which kind of looks like a greater than symbol going in one direction. And that represents a torch, of like a flaming torch and a wand. Now, the way that fire energy is utilized in normal society that we don't quite understand is if we have a romantic candlelight dinner, or if we want to get our groove on with our lover, we kind of light a whole entire chorus of candles around a room. The flame and the hue and energy that's put off by the flame actually is an invocation of the passions and stirring up those emotional desires through that. The wand itself with the tarot deck is a phallic symbol of a male genital, fully erect male genital. There's also elements of flowers, which are the female genital. But we're going to move from genitalia and start talking about the other elements of fire. Fire also balances things out. The way that regeneration occurs in some wild forests is when the fire comes through, it burns away all the old growth, fertilizes the soil, opens up the seed, and starts that balance in nature. We can utilize fire in our own lives through what's called, or known as fire therapy, as some friends would call it. It's where you sit outside with your friends and you have a fire in community, and you're kind of just mesmerized by the fire, and you can talk about anything, and it can bring in that social order and balance. On a very interesting side of this, scrying is also done with flame. So scrying is a way of divination that when you stare at the fire and you channel energies, you can get cognitive understanding, and that is where the balance of the mind comes, and you can actually absorb that energy. Now, with this, we're also seeing a lot of energy from sunlight, sunfire energy. And that's where a very specific form of magic comes in with the fire energy, and that is called pyromancy. And that, in an essence, is the fire element. So on that compass that we drew out on the piece of paper, let's hop to the south, because we're going to carry on to the south now and go on with the water element. Now, the water element is all about intuition, emotions, purification, and stability. In the tarot deck, the keeper of this is the High Priestess card. The High Priestess is symbolic of all things intuitive and emotional, and the management of that. Psychics and divinators use the High Priestess as kind of their totem, I guess you could say. In the wonderful world of runes, Lagu's rune is actually that. And the Lagu's rune is actually a hook. It looks like a straight line with a hook on the top of it. And it's the rune of water. It's connected closely to tides. And it's also in reference to the human heart and the emotions held within there. And so when the hook is up, it's the tide. When the hook is down, it is the ebb. So it's the ebb and flow of time with the water energy. So with this one, kind of like with fire, there is a sub-element, and that is the moon. So with the moon, we have a lot of the feminine energy of the high priestess. Now, how this all applies in our world, in Christianity, we see baptism. Now, baptism is the outward expression of an inward commitment to the Christian God. It's symbolic of the individual going into the water as themselves and coming back reborn. So, in doing so, they're utilizing the water for first purification, and second is kind of the intonation of their soul with their creators. The other way that we see water being utilized is in moon water. Now, the way that moon water works, it's a Wiccan practice, and I think other witches use it, and other forms of spellcraft use it. And it's where you utilize moon energy trapped in the water itself, so that you can kind of supercharge the water, so it can be utilized for blessings or utilized for cleansing stones. And of course, that also leads us to holy water that's utilized in Catholic Church services for sanctification purposes. As I said earlier, with water, we see a lot of divination because it puts the practitioner of this spell, this element spellcraft, in alignment with that high priestess moon energy. They actually have a lot more foresight, claircognizance, and that's kind of when I do tarot, that's the area that I kind of hang out in right there. And that sums up our water element. So now that we've traveled to the south, let's pop over to the west and see what the earth has in store for us. On the west side, we have the earth energy. So the earth energy is kind of our mortality, growth, death, birth, rebirth, and the nurturing elements of the earth. So in the world of tarot, this is represented by the Empress. And the reason being is because the Empress is our mother. Mother Earth gives us sustenance, food, and it also will give us blessings and also will give us discipline when we need it. In the rune world, this is represented by the rune Ihwaz, or also known as the Yew Tree in the Scandinavian language. Now, the Yew Tree is also representative of Yggdrasil, which is the tree of life in the Norse faith. So that's the tree that reaches all the way up into the high plains and all the way down to the low plains, giving us complete access to death, birth, rebirth, and the afterlife. With that is, just to sum it up, actually, the rune Ihwaz is kind of like the death card in tarot, where it is the complete representation of death and rebirth. So let's talk about how this applies in the spellcraft that we see in our society. And I'm going to start with Christianity. Now, Christianity has this thing called the Eucharist, which is a very sacred rite to their faith. It is the representation of Jesus being nailed to a cross, being resurrected and crucified. So it's kind of the death and the rebirth. In the Eucharist, we have wine and we have bread. Now, the wine obviously comes from the vine and it is processed through time into wine. And the bread is the wheat from the field, both showing the two elements, fresh and old sustenance, long-term, short-term. When they consume of the Eucharist, they believe that through spiritual principles, it turns into the blood and body of their crucified Lord. And so that also shows the sustenance through that rebirth, as well as that sustenance through the earth energy. Now, on a non-Christian element, we will talk about shamanism for a bit. Some sects of shamanism will utilize dirt from graveyards to imbued energy and ritual. So let's say a client who has a long history of psychological ailments wants some healing from a shaman. What this shaman will do is collect some dirt from the grave of a psychologist, a well-known psychotherapist, and will do a ritual with that dirt to call in and invoke the remnants of that spirit to assist the person with healing. In the Wiccan world, they actually utilize a lot of graveyard dust as well, or dirt as well. One way in which they'll do that is that they will end relationships with the dirt. And the reason why they'll do that, it sounds very morbid. They are not intending to curse the individual. They are drawing a healthy death to that relationship so that something new can grow from that. It's the regenerative principles of allowing it to die very, very, very nicely. And finally, I've heard in some pagan sects, they will also take dirt from graves and put it in their garden. This honors the regenerative process and the circle of life of continuously rebirthing itself. There's a lot of heavy energy in the earth element, but it's both beautiful as well as scary. And I think it's actually probably one of the more powerful elements out there. So let's leave the west and pop over to the east. And on the east, we have the air energy. Now, the air energy is thought, logic, spoken word, conflict management, and mental space. In the tarot world, this is the emperor. So on the west, if you remember, we had the empress, we had mom, and here we have the dad, the emperor, the holder of all logic and knowledge. On the rune, we have Degas, and Degas is the gateway, and it has a dual meaning. It's ignorance leading to the end of despair, and that's a very true statement when it comes to our understanding of knowledge. We sit in a position of absolute ignorance at all times, and we'll have a little bit more knowledge that we will kind of milk out of that ignorance, and that'll end some of our despair, but we still ultimately are in that level of despair. That old parable: a fool thinks he's a wise man, and a wise man knows he's a fool. The other element behind this Degas is there's two kind of like, looks like an hourglass on the side, and there's two triangles, and those can also be representative of the two crows of Odin, which is Hunin, which is thought, and Monin, which is mind or memory. Now, how does this apply to our wonderful world here is that the air energy is a vibrational frequency as it travels through air. So if you're walking down the street and somebody bumps into you and say, "Hey, fucker, go to hell," well, you're cursing them. You may not think of that way, but that's where the whole idea of curse words came from. You are wishing them to go to hell. You're wishing them damnation for shoving into you. And it's actually a manifestation of what our intentions are. Same thing can happen when we are wishing luck to an individual. Hey man, good luck on that test. You are beseeching the good blessings of the gods upon them. And that is how the spoken word comes into effect there. Now, with thought and with mental cognition, we see ourselves looking at the meditative state of individuals. Now, the way that the meditative state of individuals works is if we always hear, there's always the Om that's done by certain meditators, or we also have singing bowls that make noise. When we meditate, we go into a conscious frequency, a brain rhythm that is a wavelength in itself. And the audio that's around us also applies to that wavelength. The other way in which that we can utilize this wonderful air energy is by conflict management. In the tarot, the emperor is actually the manager of all swords. If we think about conflict, the best way to resolve it is through the mentation process and conversation process. We listen to the auditory words, we process, we decipher, we cognitively come to a conclusion, and then rejoin it. And that is also echoed by the Degas rune being the hourglass, two triangles communicating with one another. So, as you can imagine, when we apply this to a magical sense, there is a lot of music, sounds, and putting out blessings or cursings in our intuitions. And that sums up our air energy. So when we start putting together our spellcraft, utilizing the four energy elements, we start to see these combinations that come out that are being utilized for a specific purpose. An example would be when we are scrying, we are in a meditative, cognitive sense, utilizing the air energy while looking into a burning fire, right? Our thought meditative process is pulling out the purification balance of the fire. And that way we can find ourselves utilizing both elements. Now, on the same time, we can also be seeing the same thing with incense during meditation. We have the air wafting over the incense, which is giving us the purification of the area and space, as well as a clear mental thought and cognition. Another way that this is done is through ash spreadings, where an object of significant value for whatever purpose, positive value or negative value, is burnt in a ritual. And those ashes are then spread and mixed with dirt, signifying the end of that object or what that object represents, it being put back into the earth so that good new things can come from it. There are endless combinations. And in fact, a lot of religious ceremonies, for everything from Wiccanism down, utilizes a lot of these. Example, some sects of Wiccanism will actually have all of those elements in the casting of a circle and in the invocation of their god and goddess. It doesn't have to be all, and it can always be limited to one if need be, but it's kind of the blueprints of spellcraft. So, as promised, here are 4 ways that you can do spellcraft in your own home. Not particular to any religion or any belief structure, just little things that you can do yourself, just to put a little bit of magic in your life. The first is, I'll give you 2 for this one, is the fire side of things. First is a burn list. So let's say you're having a really bad day. Everything's just real bad. If you take out a piece of paper and you write down everything on that list that's causing you problems and really mentally think about it. Think about it hard, all the way from top to bottom. Fold it up, light a candle, burn it down to ashes, take those ashes and spread it into dirt. What you are doing is you're taking the mental manifestations of those things that are causing you stress. You're destroying the stress that's being caused by it. You're returning it into the earth so that you can actually get new growth from it. The other way that you can use fire is a bay leaf spell, which is a really neat one, where you take a bay leaf and you write on it your wish. Any wish you want, $1 million, doesn't matter. Cognitively think about it, light the bay leaf. What's happening is the fire is taking that earth energy and it's renewing that energy and it's putting it out into the universe to give you that manifestation. Moving on to the water method, this one is one that I heard from an actually from a psychic tarot reader as well. And this one is blessing water. If you use your mental psychic ability, because everybody has some in some degree, and you bless your water in the glass, you just hold on to the water and you put out your intention that you want that water to be blessed for your purposes and for your edification, and you drink that water. The intuition that you put into that water and purification will bring you purity of emotions and purity of mind. It's a way of supercharging your water for your day. Now, for the earth element, this is one of the most sweetest ones I think I've ever heard, and it's called an intention plant. So let's say you have something that you never want to forget in your life. You don't want to forget your great Aunt Ruth. So you get an intention plant and you nurture that plant so that you're continuously nurturing that thought and you want it to grow. And what'll happen is when that plant dies, you no longer have to really concern yourself with that thought. And as long as you were concerned with that thought, the plant will live. A culture that actually does this very well is the Hebrews in Jerusalem. There's a segment of, I believe it's near the Weeping Wall, where they planted plants or trees in commemoration of the individuals who helped Jews escape persecution during the Holocaust. And the idea is that that legacy of kindness will live on as long as that plant itself lives on. Very sweet way of utilizing earth energy to renew your concepts and renew your constant intuition in regards to those individuals and your intention in regards to those individuals. And finally, we have air. And air is a very, very good one. This is another one that I think is very sweet. If you are walking and you mentally pick up on somebody that you know, like right in front of you, you notice something nice about them. You, from your mind mentation, bring it words and let them know. Your shirt looks really nice. You're elevating their position. You're making them feel good. You're utilizing some of the most profound energy that you could possibly do in elevating their position, utilizing your words, just speaking kindness and giving them blessings. Now, this is also equally applicable to individuals who are causing you harm. If somebody in a sphere that you don't have to work with, because you don't want to sour the workspace, but just somebody who's around you don't like, you can make some sort of a snide comment. They make some stupid statement about the person in front of you. Hey, look at that cross-eyed nerd. Yeah, I think they look a little bit better than you, actually. I think I'd much prefer hanging around with them than you. And then, of course, they're going to be caught off. What do you mean? Well, you heard what I mean, right? And now you're causing them, you're holding up a mirror to them, and utilizing your words to show them that what they're doing is stupid. And you're going to repel the bad people away. And that way you can regulate who's coming in, who's going out. It's greedy for yourself, and you're lifting up the people who are wonderful in your life. And that is how you can apply these principles in your life. As promised, here is your bonus. So when I first started noticing the elemental magic was years ago in a small town called Cranbrook, where I was dating a lady, and I realized that our energies were a little bit different and that we complemented each other's energies. She was very fiery lady, and I was very water-based and very earth-based, which I still am to this day. And so it kind of dawned on me that I attracted her because of that fire, and also because of that air that she had. And then with that, she also liked my kind of earth and my water. The problem is that because our two energies were not really temperate, we created a torrent, and it just didn't work well for either of us. But it's kind of where we are. Once we identify the certain energies, the passionate energy or the intuition energy, or the want and need to help nurture, grow, once we identify what element we reside in, we can actually figure out who we are attracting. And with that, we can also establish boundaries with those who are in our life, so that if I am a very much an earth person and I am attracting fire people, or I have fire people in my life, they don't burn me to the earth. That being said, also, is that if I'm a water person, which I am, and I attract a fire person, I don't try to put out their flame, right? It's a way of analyzing our own lives, our own strengths, and those of people around us, and start of building a community around our spell work or our spellcraft. And that, my friend, is your bonus for this podcast. And that concludes a wonderful episode of Bucky's Pagan Guided Adventures. Side note, it's my birthday today, June the 20th. So if you're so inclined, shoot me a message. You can find me on Facebook at Bucky's Tarot, or @Tarot with a capital T, Bio with a capital B, and Bucky with a capital B. Send me some birthday well wishes, or just send me a message. I'm coming to Edmonton too, by the way. I've been away for a while, so if you want me to meet up with you, shoot me a message and we'll do some coffee. I'll be there from the 22nd till about the 6th of July, 22nd of June to 6th of July. So until then, have a wonderful week.